Hello, everyone. I'm Raga Olga De Silva, or Totally Out Now, as you know me. I'm the director and co founder of Speaking Minds, India's largest international speaker agency. Well, I've been waiting for this day forever. Yet I have to admit, it was something that I have wanted but never thought possible. To have this bold, outspoken, fearless, award winning journalist, recipient of the Padma Shri, a thought leader, and now an entrepreneur, get on from the other side with me felt surreal. But it is real. Please join me in welcoming the Barkha Dutt. Barkha,
Thank you.
thank you
Thank you,
so
Radha.
much for this. I just cannot tell you how grateful I am and how honored I am.
No, I'm sorry. We've been planning to do this forever and it should have happened much earlier. And I'm really, really sorry it took so long. But I'm glad we're finally able to do it.
I'm so glad, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, Barkha. Barkha, one first conversation. First question is, how does it feel to be on the other side?
Awful. It's so much, and I say awful because it means giving up control, which I hate doing. I'm a control freak, classic type A personality. And I much prefer asking the questions and answering them. That said, I'm here for AMA. Ask me anything, no holds barred, no censorship. So feel free. I know we're live, so even people watching this may have questions, and no question scares me. Though, of course,
And
it's much easier to ask the questions than to answer them.
that's what we love about you, Barkha, that you're fearless, and I personally admire that about you. And I have learned so much along the way. Our journey started together in the early 90s, and
Mhm.
I've followed your journey. I've lived in different countries, but wherever I've lived, I've always followed Barkha. That I must
Thank
say
you.
that. So I'm a
Thank
huge
you.
fan, and
Thank you.
my admiration and respect comes from the work that you have done, to be honest. And then, of course, I have had the opportunity to meet you and actually watch you in action, and that only grew. So, how did it start for you, really? At what age did journalism become your calling?
Actually, I did not know that journalism would be my calling, even though I grew up as the daughter of a journalist. And my mother, who died when I was 13, was a real trailblazer of her times. And I grew up on stories with her telling me that when she first went at the age of 19 to apply for a job at the Hindustan Times, there were no women in the newsroom. There was no television then. And when she asked for a job, the editor, without blinking, told her, well, we don't use women in the newsroom, but if you'd like to report on the flower shows in the city, you're most welcome to join. Yeah, this happened, and she rose to become the chief of bureau of the paper. Many people think of me as the first woman war correspondent of India. That too belongs, that description or that claim to belongs to my mother. In 1965, when a war broke out between India and Pakistan, Prabha, her name was Prabha, again asked the editor, "Can I go and report this war?" And he said, "Are you crazy? We can't send women to the front line." And so she said, "If you're not going to let me cover the biggest story that there is, I may as well go on leave. So give me a few days off." And she took a few days off. She took a notebook and pen. One of her cousins was in the army, and she went to the border alone with a notepad and pen with no infrastructure. So this is the role model I grew up with, and obviously it influenced me. But despite that, I didn't actually think I wanted to be a journalist. I thought I wanted to make movies or I wanted to be a lawyer. My entrance exam for law faculty was on the same day as the entrance exam for mass communication at Jamia, which was my first master's. My second was from Columbia in New York. And so I had to make this very tough decision that I wasn't totally sure of. And when I first applied for a job, uh, I was a producer and a sound engineer in the PCR, a sound mixer. I used to make sound. I was trained to make sound. I was trained to be a film editor. And but then, we were a small organization at NDTV. Everybody did everything. I was sent out to report a story as well, along with being a producer. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Absolutely. I mean, how fascinating is that? The tenacity, does it come from this, from doing things your way?
I think so. I think it's the reason that I'm probably loved and hated in equal measure is that I do not conform to anyone's idea of me. And I think that I've been like that since I was very young. I have a very fixed idea of who I want to be. Sometimes I don't know who I want to be, but I live out that confusion as well. Sometimes I'll regret it, but that regret has to be mine.
Yeah.
I can't fit into anyone else's expectation of me. I think that one of the reasons that I irritate so many people, I know many people love me, but I also know I irritate many people, is that I can't fit into a box on which they can put a label and put a ribbon on it. And so tenacity, yes, but also ferocious stubbornness.
Fantastic. The last few months we've been watching you and I've been like following your lockdown stories in
Mhm.
particular. 120 days on the road, Barkha,
Yeah, yeah.
non-stop, right? I mean, like,
In the beginning, we would go and try and come back or stay in the car or come back to Delhi, and then we just set forth and came back after it was all over.
I mean, you really walked the talk, right? So many challenges, and I've followed
Yeah,
every day. I was following you around.
yeah,
I was thinking, you were eating on
yeah.
the street. You didn't have a place to sleep at times. You were sleeping in your car. You were traveling to different parts of India, covering some heartbreaking stories.
Hmm.
I'm just,
Hmm.
what made you first of all start that when everybody else was working from home and enjoying the lockdown in a manner, or not
Hmm.
enjoying it, but we were forced to stay at home. So what made you
Yeah.
do that, and what made you continue doing that for 120 days?
So what happened was that after the prime minister announced the lockdown, and he came on television and he said it was 8 p.m. He said from midnight the country is shutting down. Like everybody else, I thought that India had no choice, that this was an inevitability. The world had locked down, so so would we have to. So the next day, I just drove because the media was listed as an exempt essential service, and it's a tragedy that such few of our senior colleagues in the TV industry chose to assert their essentialness at that point, and we can talk about that a bit later. I just drove to the borders of Delhi, and I suddenly saw this people walking. There were just men, women, mostly men, and children walking. And I realized that something terrible is about to unfold. And initially, even then, I didn't know the scale of what we were about to witness, but I saw at the border with UP, at the border with Punjab, at the border with Haryana, it was the same thing. People were just leaving in droves. I tried to reach out to the chief ministers of Delhi, of the adjoining states. There was no state representation, there was no media. Other than me and a few local stringers, as we call them, local reporters, a couple of photographers, but no TV media at all. And there was no representation of the state, a handful of policemen just sitting by, letting these people walk. And I think it's then that I realized that, okay, something momentous is about to happen. And if I sit here in my office, in my studio, I am not going to be able to tell this story. And it was like a calling, it was my duty, it was almost like a test. It was like a test of being a journalist. That if you fail this test, then the reason that you became a journalist is flawed.
So, and you were wearing masks all the time. Did you not find, and I know that you were following all these social distancing
Mhm. Yeah.
norms that were set, but none of us knew, right, what the impact of that would be. I mean, it's also new for us at that time. It was very new. Did you at any time feel fearful or frightened for your own health?
Of course I did. I think anyone who says that we were out there and we didn't feel any fear is lying. But what happens, and this has happened to me before, I've reported from conflict zones, I've reported from war zones, and therefore to some extent I have this exposure of hardship. Though this was very different, than anything I've ever been in before. Mostly because the enemy or the adversary was invisible. You didn't know enough about the adversary. The science kept changing. When we set out to report, the World Health Organization's chief scientist told me that masks were not necessary and that masks should be left for doctors. And it's only that as we went along that the science changed. And of course, there were times I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd be like, I'm going to get it. And I would ask myself, is this what you want to die from? But what would happen would be the sheer adrenaline and the passion would displace the fear. So it's not that the fear ever goes away, but that the fear gets displaced, right?
Sure,
The
sure.
fear gets displaced, and that's what happened to me. The fear got displaced. Secondly, while we tried to follow the norms, right? We tried to wear the cloth masks, we washed our hands, we traveled with sanitizer. When we went inside COVID hospitals, we wore full PPE. But Raga, the fact is that I couldn't implement the social distancing norms after a point because the human tragedy that I was exposed to was so deep. I had women more than once just collapsing in tears of helplessness, and I just couldn't. I had to reach out, and I remember this woman just clasping onto me, and I wasn't going to push her away. She just held on to me after the third time. She had tried to walk from her Juggi to the border to try and walk home a few hundred kilometers and had been sent back by the police,
Gosh.
had no food, had no water. And I just hugged her. And and another time that happened to me was like this old woman, Leelavati, who I
Yep.
met outside a station in Mumbai, and she'd been thrown out by her son, who was a drunk and who'd beaten her up, and her children didn't want her, and she just she just kept holding on to me and saying, I'll beg if I have to, but get me on a tree. Now, at that point, also because I'd been out enough, I just, I couldn't be robotic about that moment. Then we went into Bastis, we were in Dharavi, we were in a million slum tenements, eight people living in one room. So the stay at home concept has no meaning. We're walking through, an area where 8 lakh people were sharing 8,000 toilets. That's the Dharavi data for you. So this whole idea of social distancing, while we took precautions, began to feel like an impossibility. It's not possible. You get onto a back of a truck and you see 200 people crammed in the size of a closet. What social distancing are you going to practice with them? You get into a tiny COVID hospital in Dharavi in Mumbai, and the hospital ward our closets at home are bigger than their hospital ward. What social distancing are you going to practice? So as I traveled, we had to shed we had to shed some of our phobias. We had to just do the best we could. Wash your hands with soap as many times a day. Throw away your mask, keep wearing new masks, sanitize your shoes, your hands, your clothes. But that's all we could do.
Wow. So it's a huge risk you take, right? You're taking a risk every day. And
Yes,
and
yes,
when we
yes.
take such risks, a lot of people from within our ecosystem try to hold us back. So were you ever
Yeah.
told not to do something, which I see as your life pattern, right? So how do you
My
deal with
life
things like that?
my life pattern is that I have a aging father who has given up trying to hold me back from any story. Of course I have friends and family and people in my life who will say, "Are you sure? Isn't it a bit much?" I used to get messages saying, "Okay, please, now can you come home? Just enough. You've made your point. You've done, by the end of it, we have done some 260 programs. And if you go to our YouTube channel, Mojo Story, you'll see there's a section called On the Road with the Pandemic, because at the end of it, that's what we felt we were. We were just on the road with the pandemic, right?
Wow.
And my sister sent me a message saying, "Can you come home now?" But I just ignored it. I ignored it because she knew and I knew that I would ignore it, right? And I kept going till I could. I even diverted in the middle. I couldn't drive there. I drove everywhere else because there was no air transport when I started, and to get to little places anyway, the road was easier. But I also went to Ladakh when the Chinese first came in, and in the middle of all this, in the middle of the pandemic, the Chinese troops decided to park themselves inside eastern Ladakh, and I was at the Bihar border, and it had taken us 12 hours to get to the Bihar border, and I just looked at my team and I was like, I think we need to turn around. So we turned around, we drove in reverse. We reached Delhi at 3 in the morning. We took the 6 a.m. flight to Ladakh because there's no other way to get there. Spent 5 days, came back, then went back to Bihar.
Gosh, I remember messaging you and saying, "Are you in Ladakh or have you left Ladakh?" Because I think one day you
Yeah,
were in Bihar, the
yeah.
previous day in Kerala somewhere, and suddenly you were in Ladakh. I remember
It
that.
was,
Your interview with Sonam Wangchuk was brilliant, by the
yes.
way. And
Thank
I'm just
you.
coming back to the Leelavati story. I remember that story. I mean, I've watched
Yeah.
all your stories, like I said, but that
Thank
particular
you.
story, Barkha, hit a really hit a chord for many of us. I mean, all of us. There's one thing we revere is our mothers, and someone treating your mother so poorly. But that was one of the stories that came up. I
Mhm.
still remember that frame where she's sitting outside the Bandra station, and I think stories like that you bring, to the world are stories that make an impact. But my question to you is, you've seen so much of pain, grief, suffering, right? For years and years, you've worked in conflict zones, you've seen the lockdown. So how do you manage to be so involved and yet keep separated?
I don't think I'm separated. I'm quite candid about the fact that the kind of reportage I've done over the years, the kind of reportage I've done the last few months, has certainly damaged me. I certainly find I'm quicker to tears, quicker to rage, quicker to laughter. All emotions are heightened. I've always been a perfectionist. So even in the midst of great tragedy or great hardship, I expect the moment not to be missed on camera. Small things get under my skin, and like I think I've become peculiar in that way that big things don't faze me, but small things do. just before we were starting this conversation, there was something wrong in our software link to you, and I didn't get the shot that I wanted. I was really upset with my team because I was like, why couldn't you fix it, right? So I think these are all signs of the fact that I live with an extraordinary level of intensity within me. It's like there's too muchness of everything. And I see that too muchness is part of personality, but part of the ways that I think I absorb everything that I see, that your life is played out in some ways in the public domain, that everyone feels they have a piece of you, everyone feels they have an opinion of you. Mostly it doesn't bother me, but sometimes it's hilarious. I know even when you put out the fact that you were going to talk to me, there were some people who were like, we love Barkha. The others like, oh God, she's horrid. Why are you talking to her? And like, I'm reading these comments and it's like, you're reading about yourself like you're a third person. So it's not a typical life. I have to recognize that I don't live a typical life, right? So I'm not going to be a typical person. And it's a chicken and egg thing. I'm not a typical person, so I live this life. But because I live this life, I'm even less of a typical person. And in ways that I learn about myself every day, parts of it damage me, parts of it accentuate certain parts of my personality. But if I had to describe myself, there's a too muchness of me in everything I do. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad for me.
So you are, I mean, I see you as a very sensitive person. I don't know how the others see you. And I know that you have huge amount of fan following. And of course you have the other side, like you said, there are people
It's right. That's
and
public life.
yeah,
That's
and
public life,
true.
right? And that's a couple of things. That's one, public life. Two, it's also what comes with being a woman who doesn't live conventionally. And I remember interviewing Hillary Clinton once, and people used to keep whatever else you may think about her. A lot of the commentary was about her pantsuits and her hair, and all kinds of other things. And I asked her like, how do you cope with this? And she said, you know what, Barkha, if you are in public life, if you're a woman in public life, and you're reasonably successful, and you have a mind of your own, you've got to have a skin as thick as the hide of a rhinoceros. So I think over time, I do have a skin as thick as the hide of a rhinoceros when it comes to people who I don't know or who I don't care about. But everyone else who knows me will say, you're a complete softie, right? So so I think anyone who knows me knows how soft I can be, and I think that softness doesn't take away from my strength when required. So I am that mix. So that kind of public commentary, the adulation, the hatred, the presumed knowledge about me, that comes A, from, as I said, being in the public eye, B, from being unconventional, and 3, from being a woman, a successful woman, and an independent woman.
Sure. I mean, we've been on your We the Women show where you
Yes,
invited
yes.
me and my family, and so much of respect you showed us, Barkha. And that's something that, I live with and I'm grateful for, because a lot of people don't show respect for other people's journeys, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I saw that amazing side to you that day. I don't think many people really know that, Barkha, when you did We the Women show, you had not only had stories, people like us there, and you gave us a wonderful time. That's the first thing. But that you were on stage behind the scene from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. Oh, and I don't know, beyond, I'm sure, because at 9 we finally left. And when I chatted with you the next day, you said that you didn't even have time to take a loo break. And to me, like, wow. And you
I'll tell
were,
you a story. I'll tell you a
please.
story. Firstly, it was lovely to have you on the platform, and it was extraordinary actually to hear your story and the modern family. I remember what the panel was called, the modern family, with you being, out and gay, and your former husband helping you and your partner Nicola to raise your children. I think that's lovely. It was just lovely. But I was going to share a little story about how mad and intense I can be. So before we came to Mumbai, which is where we had you, we had We the Women in Bangalore, and I was diagnosed with dengue, and all our sponsors said, just call it off. It's okay. We understand. I was like, there's no way I'm calling it off. I have worked so hard to do this, right? There's no way I'm calling it off. So I checked myself into a nursing home near my house, and I got onto intravenous fluids for 5 days, which I would never have done in the normal course, but I needed to get better so I could just go and do this event. And I was still not okay. The doctor was like, you can't go. I was like, I am going. So I flew to Bangalore. I got a local hospital to come and put me on a drip. So I was on a drip the whole night, and then there was a nurse on 24-hour duty. I would go backstage. I would get the injection. I would get the drip while someone else was moderating a few panels, and then I would go back. So that is me. Now, I'm not saying this to boast. I'm not even saying this to offer proof that I'm certified not typical. I'm just saying that's me. I can't help it. That is the too muchness. That is when I care about something or someone, it is complete.
So who is Barkha Dutt? There's so many aspects to you and they're so diverse.
I can't answer that in one line. I guess I'm a sum of my parts, as we all are. Some of the parts are contradictory. I have ferocious individualism. If I had to pick up one thing or two things that I have above everything else, I need to feel passion, otherwise, I'm bored. So I need a challenge at all times. And to live a regular, routine, regimented life sometimes feels difficult because I'm used to challenges. I'm used to a kind of adrenaline rush that comes from being in a difficult situation. I feel everything very much. I can be volatile because I need things to be 100 out of 100, and if they're 95 out of 100, I feel I failed, and so I'm a good teacher but difficult to work with because I have that level of expectation. You know, if the lighting is off, the edit is not good, then it's not just a bad day; it's a terrible day. So for me, everything gets underlined and heightened. Right? So does the good stuff. So when things go well, they're also extraordinary. When I feel affection, I feel lots of it. So I am all these weird things, but mostly I think you never really find out who you are, right? Like I'm going to be 50 in what? I'm 48 now. It's a year and a half, I'll be 50. If you ask me, do you still have clarity of clarity? Do you really know who you want to be? Do you really know? I still don't know. I still feel as confused as I was at 18. Like I don't think some of us ever fully grow up.
No, and I think we're learning, right? We're work in
Yeah,
progress.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
learning more about myself than I did earlier because I think now we are more assertive in our own minds, possibly.
The funny thing is that people say that for women it gets tougher as you grow older. I actually think it gets so much easier. Everything gets easier, right? Like your need to answer to other people, you need to apologize for who you are, you need to conform to someone else's. Because as you grow older, you just become like, okay, these are the number of good years I have left, and this is how I want to live them. And I think the one thing that this pandemic has driven home is the fragility of your existence. And I would say that short of willfully hurting people, just do what makes you happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, recently someone shared a comment on your Insta and they called you a prima donna. I love your response. You know, I remember commenting some FM. We don't.
I mean, I was going to say no, but and I was like, what the hell? Yeah, okay, I am a prima donna now. I love it. I earned it. I didn't inherit it. I didn't. You didn't give it to me. There was no Santa in my life who gifted this prima donna-ness, if that's even a word to me.
Yeah.
Everything I have in my life is made by me, is earned by me, is put together by me. If my faults are mine, my achievements are mine too. So why shouldn't I own them?
You know, I don't know about why people think calling people names like a prima donna is an insult. I saw that as a badge of honor. I said, like,
I, I think it's time to wear these words that people use for women as just embrace the slurs, or
sure, sure.
embrace the contempt that comes your way. That really spooks people. They don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, of course. And when you don't engage or you engage with them and saying, I agree with you, actually agree with you
Yeah,
100 times or billion
yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There is
yeah.
no
Yeah.
engagement after that. But but the point is that you get trolled so much.
Mhm.
And I know we spoke about it earlier, but I just want to know that do you think that trolling is a normal thing, or it is something that there are bullies around, or it's something a conflict within us that we,
Mhm.
think it's
So
right to use?
I don't want to normalize trolling, and there's a reason for it because even if I am inoculated against it, there are younger people out there who have gone off these platforms because they can't speak their mind or they've been hounded off it. There are journalists who have tweaked their opinion because they say if I say this, I'll get trolled. So trolling has begun to interfere with free speech, free thought,
Sure.
especially women, a woman's right to a safe online space. It has become the equivalent of mob lynching. And yet, I have changed how I respond to trolls. So there was a time when I was younger, when I started coming onto Twitter, Facebook, all of these things that are now intrinsic parts of our life, our broadcasting platforms. And I used to argue with my trolls. I was like, why are you saying this? I would be hurt, I'd be angry, I'd be agitated, I'd be, you liar. And they'd be like some persistent tropes, right? And they keep confronting me with those persistent tropes, some Radia tapes. You said
Yeah.
this about Kashmiri Pandits. You were responsible for the deaths of so and so soldiers at Kargil. And initially, I would patiently answer each one of them. This is not what happened. This is why it's a lie. I didn't say this, I said this. What the hell are you doing? You are explaining yourself to perfect strangers, right? Yes, as a public person, my audience has the right to ask me questions up to a reasonable point. Anything that's used against me, I have recorded and answered on public platforms. They're available. You just have to do a Google search on me. Any of the controversies that are thrown my way, I have answered in detail, at length, more than once, about 100 times. Now, I can't keep answering them every time someone asks me this, right? And then I realized that actually this is an elaborate mind game. And the mind game is to get under the skin of people so much that they become defensive, they change how they think, they stop speaking, they change what they speak, or they move away from the platform. So, trolling is an attempt to silence people, in particular women. We cannot normalize it. But the best answer to trolling is to ignore it.
Great.
Ignoring them is not normalizing. Most platforms have the option of block and mute. Use block and mute freely. It is not anti-free speech to block someone. Don't let anyone tell you that. They are free in their own little bubble to keep opining about you, right? Or wherever they want to. But you don't, it's the equivalent of my choosing to not let you into my house to
Correct.
say bad things to me about me. Please say them in your house. Right? So I find that people get not people trolls get really bugged because I just laugh at them. I laugh at them, right? I mostly ignore them and sometimes I laugh at them. Sometimes I post chichi photos and say, hi, this is for my trolls. Like I even do that. Like I even have like some random conversation going on with my massive trolls. Like once I had a very toothy smile and I loved the photograph and I put it out there. I was like, hey, this is my answer to all my trolls. Like, what are they going to say? Once
Oh,
they realize that they can't do shit to you, what are they going to say?
yeah, they'll go to the next one, basically.
Yeah,
They find the
yeah,
next victim,
yeah.
really.
So, but I understand that everyone is not me, that this has come to me after years of experience, that this has come to me because I'm a person of relative privilege. This has come to me because I have a certain personality. And you cannot expect everybody to go through this, so the platforms are accountable. I just want to say that while I say ignore your trolls, I do not want to be complicit in normalizing this kind of trolling,
Sure.
especially with women, a highly sexualized, violent, coarse, slanderous trolling. You know,
True. So, do you think that brings me to my next question about the whole gendering bit? Do you think that
Mhm.
as women, all of us in prominent positions, you more so as a public figure, do you feel that if we were a man, if you were a man, things would be different?
Of course.
Yeah.
If I were a man, would I have a Wikipedia entry about three alleged husbands who don't exist? I mean,
Wow.
would anyone care? And
Yeah.
this started with trying to explain my pluralistic secular politics that apparently I date only Muslims. Two of the men they named, I don't even think they're real people. The third was a friend of mine, not even a former romantic partner or anything, just a friend, a professional colleague. And in the beginning, I would keep writing to Wikipedia, or my friends would keep going and editing the page. But I reached a point where it was like, you can't spend your life reacting to internet rumors, right? Now, if I were a guy, would anyone be interested in how many times I've been married, not been married, what my weight is, what my hair length is, who I look like? This is commentary that only women go through. There's a photograph out there somewhere, which is not of me. I don't know who the girl is. She's smoking a cigarette. She's sitting next to another girl who's having a drink. And these trolls keep putting this photograph to show that I'm of loose morals. And it's not me, but I keep saying, what's the problem with this photograph? Because if these were two men, you would not be posting this photograph. You would not be. I'm not a fan of smoking, but that's not the point. The point is the double standard, right? Or the
Sure.
point is the character assassination. Character assassination happens only to women.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen to men. And the resentment of success happens only with women. The expectation of conformity happens only with women. These things happen only to women.
Interesting. Interesting. So, does it make you cynical at times, Barkha?
Of course. Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
how do you work through it?
I work through it by sometimes getting pissed off and angry, but I mostly work through it by keeping my close circle very close. Most of my closest friends are not from this public world. They're people I went to college with. They're people who knew me before I was a journalist and before I was Barkha Dutt. They're people who know me after I'm Barkha Dutt, right? So they're not interested in this public dimension to me. Although I always say that what you see about me in public is pretty much who I am in private. I don't have a public face and a private face. It's pretty much just a natural extension of who I am. But that said, I recognize that I inhabit a space where relationships can be transactional, where people worship the rising sun, where when you're having a bad day, very few people will stand by you. And my way of dealing with that is to have a good instinct about who's a good person and to allow only those people into my innermost circles and invest deeply in friendships. I invest deeply in friendships.
Fantastic. I think that gut instinct is so important for us
Yeah,
to follow,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah, yeah,
post-script, we always say, I thought about it. I didn't feel it was right,
yeah,
but I did it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a lot of disparity, right, based on social conditioning in this world today. I mean, we face this all the time. That's what we're talking about. And you use your platform so effectively for meaningful dialogues. And your We the Women, I think now it's called the conversations we have, right? What does it
So,
say?
so it's called Conversations for Change.
Oh, for change.
We the Women remains the Meta brand, but
Okay.
we started. So basically, because of COVID, we can't do our ground events now. So
Right.
we said, let's move to content. So we'll be doing different content pieces on We the Women, and the Meta sort of name remains We the Women. But we started a series of conversations with change makers called Conversations for Change, and like always, I've always believed that the mashup of women and men is very interesting if you're able to collapse class and caste and even gender sometimes, right? So, on my, as you know from having been part of We the Women, my philosophy is that I can have a conversation for change with a 80-year-old grandmom in Pune who's using her old sort of street performing art to earn a living, to a doctor who has helped provide abortions in the slums of Bombay, to a mountaineer who grew up in a village in Haryana, to the other end of the spectrum, where a Vidya Balan, a Kareena Kapoor, a Masaba, Anushka Shankar will also be in the same conversation. And actually, for me, they're just a continue. They're just the same. Parmesh Shahani. It doesn't matter whether it's sexuality and the fluidity of sexuality, whether it's class, whether it's caste, and not because I don't recognize the intersectionality, but because I believe that for me, the spirit of We the Women is that I treat them all the same. They're all change makers. They're all the same for me, whether one may be more famous than the other. So we've continued to follow the spirit of We the Women in these conversations for change. And, I think We the Women, till we can figure out how to take our events back offline, will continue to focus on content, as all of us are doing.
Sure, sure. You're an ally to the LGBT community.
Yes,
We
yes.
know that, and you have helped, start so many dialogues. So that's
Mhm.
one example, right? Like the Section 377, for instance,
Mhm.
second year, second anniversary. So I feel that the narrative keeps changing, and thanks to people like you and people like Parmesh and so many others who constantly
Mhm.
talk about it and bring it to the
Yeah,
world. But how
yeah.
do we empower more people, Barkha, to start such a dialogue? So we're not waiting for change makers, that we become the change ourselves.
Well, I think it's community conversations, right? I think what's happening is that as our world and our country and our society gets more and more polarized, the art of conversation is dead. Which is why I'm so happy you're doing this series, Raga, that you're doing, because the fact is that there's almost no space. So there are very few spaces available where you can just sit back, have a chat,
Right.
like everything's an argument, everything is a debate, everything is a for or against thing. I think most people don't live in this for and against camps. They don't live in this left and right camps. They're just people going about their work. They're trying to live. They're trying to be happy. They're trying to earn a living. They're trying to steal some moments of joy. And we need to encourage conversation. We just don't talk enough to ourselves, to each other. And I just think that this pandemic has given us an opportunity. People have time. We're all connected by technology. We're looking at the parts of technology that are alienating, like trolling. But let's look at the parts of it that have made it possible for all of us to be broadcasters, for all of us to have broadcast quality programming, for all of us to be able to talk across the oceans, right?
Sure.
So I think that the answer lies in just talking more.
So do we have to be a journalist to share stories? You know, a lot of
No.
people say to me, "Oh, you're not even a journalist. Why would you want to do this?" But I am a storyteller. I bring stories to the world, right? So
So I always say, even when I was walking with migrant workers, and I would, sometimes walk with them through the night. Sometimes I would go to their climb onto trains with them, trucks with them. But I would always think to myself that you can't preach. Whatever story you tell, it can't be to guilt your audience into caring for these people. In the end, journalism too has to be about good storytelling. If you do not tell a good story, no one's going to pay attention. In fact, the facts might be so discomforting that people will say, let me just not watch it, right? So, all the more you have to tell a good story. So, to answer your question, journalism is going through a churn, and it's going through a churn for various reasons. I mean, TV channels I don't even want to talk about because I think most of them are so shameful. But even otherwise, the churn is this, that today anybody with a good Wi-Fi connection or a dongle, a good internet connection, and a good storytelling skill can be a journalist. Anybody with gatekeeping and responsible responsible fact checking. Uh, but you may not be covering the same stories I am, but you may be able to tell a better story than I can. It doesn't, I've gone to two of the best journalism schools in the world, but I don't think that necessarily makes me more qualified to tell a story than you, right? So we have to remember that at the heart of everything, politics or media, right, is the gift to tell a good story. Everyone doesn't have the gift, but if you have that gift, it's your duty to use it for the world we live in.
you know, a lot of people want to emulate you, right, Barkha? Again, that comes from, stalking you on social media, let's say. And so what would you tell, the younger generation who wants to follow you, who want to become the next Barkha Dutt?
Well, the first thing I always say, and I hear that a lot, is don't be me, be you. Because the toughest thing that I found in life was the strength to be myself, right? So it sounds paradoxical, but if there's anything you want to follow about me, it's that be yourself. It will sometimes feel lonely, it will sometimes feel like shit. Sometimes the world will pick on you, sometimes the world will applaud you. All of it will happen to you, right? But if you find the strength to be yourself and not be someone else, you'll be untouchable. Literally, because nothing will touch you. Nothing can touch you once you have that inner strength. But in terms of what they see and what they imagine journalism to be, what I always say is, please do not become a journalist if you want to be on camera and look a certain way and you think that's what it's about, because it's not about that. It is about the sleepless nights, it is about not having food on the road, it is about not having a place to stay. We had no place to stay. We were staying sometimes in the car, sometimes at the homes of friends. I've shacked up in bunkers in war zones. So I've stayed in like, I remember in Kargil initially the military was like, we can't send you, where will you sleep, where will you go to the loo? And I was like, under the tree behind the rock, I'll sleep in the bunker with the 15 men like I did, right? So you share a little space. It's about getting dirt under your nails. It's about feeling that hunger and feeling it so acutely that you can't sleep at night. I always say that if what you do doesn't keep you hungry and awake at night, if you can't have it, you will not sleep well at night either, right? So you've got to love it that much. So I always say, if you're thinking of being the next Barkha, that I love what I do. I hate a lot of things that are happening to Indian journalism, but I still love, mostly. I have bad days too, like it, but mostly I love what I do. And if you don't totally love what you do, if this is not what drives you, if this is not what you live, breathe, eat 24/7, because news is like that, don't become a journalist. Do something else. If you want a settled, shift-oriented job, if you want work-life balance, if you want all of that, this space is not for you, because this space is like, it's not as important as medicine, but it's like medicine in how demanding it is of your time and your emotion. It's just one of those professions. All professions are different. So this is, news can happen anytime. It can happen 2 in the morning. It can happen in Ladakh. It can happen anywhere. You've got to love it, and you've got to desperately want it.
Fantastic. Wow, there's so much of intensity. I'm just like sucked into that intensity, Barkha. So, for me, when I switch off, I'm always on WhatsApp. You would have seen if when we chat, because that's my job.
Yes.
Right? And for me to switch off, I actually do things like knead dough, so I can make lots of rotis. It really helps me switch off. And I give rotis to the whole neighborhood also because I need so much of dough.
Yeah.
Or I,
Yeah.
I read books or I write. So how does Barkha that switch off? Totally switch off.
I eat Cadbury Nutties. I binge eat chocolate. But more seriously, my only switching off is reading, and like reading non-news stuff. So like picking up a book or reading some poetry, reading just interesting articles, and murder mysteries and espionage and thrillers. I'm a voracious consumer of anything that has like a murder or a spy thriller at the heart
Me
of
too.
it. It's the only thing I can watch. Like, I can't watch science fiction, I can't watch paranormal, I can't watch comedy. I just need to watch that hook of like a espionage or a murder mystery. So I just binge watch a lot of that, read a lot of that, read every Agatha Christie that was ever written, and then went on to consuming more of it in the visual media. So yeah, that's it. And I've started now that I'm back in Delhi after 3.5 months of traveling. Going out to walk every day, walk about 6 to 7 kilometers every day, and
Wow.
That's the only time that I actually tune out and
Okay.
try and tune. Try.
Do you, do you
It's
cook? Do you cook at all?
I can only
No?
make coffee. I can only make coffee. I don't know how to cook anything.
Wow. I
I
love it.
I, I, I love to eat. That's a stress buster. I
No,
don't like
again, I remember all your street food photos. I love that food
I
as
love
well.
to eat. I
Yeah.
love to eat.
So,
And that is a stress buster. I care about food. Like, I don't just eat. I care about food. I like food.
because when I look at you, I think your life as a public person must be so difficult. Do you get that space to be like when you go for a walk in the morning? Do people just let you be, Barkha?
So I think because I'm so sort of, sometimes people don't even know it's me. I'll wear my mask, I'll put my glasses on, I'll have a cleanly scrubbed face, I'll tie my hair tightly. A lot of times people are just shocked to discover that I'm the person sitting next to them or I'm the person walking next to them. Yes, a lot of times I don't get the space. Sometimes I do. Their days and their days, their cities and their cities. But mostly, I think what I've really had to get used to is the number of people who have an opinion of you, right? I think that has felt more intrusive than uh, someone tapping you on the shoulder and wanting a selfie. Just because you don't recognize yourself in those descriptions, right? And it doesn't have to be criticism. Sometimes people can foist great qualities onto you that you don't have, right? So you may know, like, that you have flaws that the world hasn't discovered. So both ways, whether it's the acute criticism or the accolades, both are a flattening of the complexity of a full person, right? So I think it took me a lot of time to get used to that. It took me a lot of time to say, ha ha ha, it's okay. Everybody thinks they know you. It's fine. Don't react. That took some unlearning.
Sure, sure. And I think that's again a process, right? That as you grow older as women, we
Yeah,
kind of embrace
yeah,
that or we don't
yeah,
embrace that. I think
yeah,
I've
yeah.
embraced that as well. And I can see lots of awards in the background. I just want to know, how did it feel to hold a Padma Shri in your hand? And I know every award is important and it's
Yeah. No, it was unreal. It felt
yeah.
fantastic. I mean, I didn't think the day would ever come when I would win like India's fourth highest civilian honor, right? And it was a complete surprise. I mean, I remember getting a phone call from the then Home Secretary because you have to give your consent. Do you consent to receive the Padma Shri? I was like, are you kidding me? Of course I like what? And and it was just, I mean, look, it's that moment, right? It just hangs on my wall. It hasn't substantially changed my life in any way, but that sense of, it fills you with pride, and it makes you feel there's a value placed on your work. And that's what matters to me. But I mean, what do I say? Like, it's, you learn or you train yourself or you teach yourself, though, to not let any of it go to your head, right? Because it's easy come, easy go. Uh, it can be given to you, it can be taken away from you in a heartbeat, right? So you have to hunker down, and as great as it feels, you have to ignore it a bit, because if you don't ignore the good stuff, the bad stuff will really kill you, right? So if you need to get that neither will topple me. I'll remain grounded, I'll remain centered. So of course it feels fantastic. I'm not going to lie, it felt fantastic. My Emmy nomination felt almost even better, right? Um, all of these trophies behind me, each one of them, thank you, and I value each one of them enormously. But I've also had shitty days and shitty moments, and you know, channels not wanting to give me a show because they don't like my guts, or they don't like my politics, whichever it is. So you've got to learn to not be too excited by this, because then you can't deal with the other end of the spectrum. And no matter who you are in your life, you will face the other end of the spectrum.
Sure.
So that's how I think about it. Enjoy it. Don't take it too seriously.
And so you have to learn to stay grounded, isn't it, somehow? And for
Yeah.
you, it must be a far tougher decision than for many of us, because you've got these accolades coming all the time. You've been told wonderful things, and at the same time, there's the other side.
Yeah, but
So
I call myself a pajama person. Yeah. You meet me at home, I'll be in my tracks, sitting on my couch, Netflixing on some murder mystery, eating popcorn. I'm just the same as everybody else, except that I have these eccentricities, that I like difficult situations, and I like telling those stories in those difficult situations, because there are no people out there telling those stories, or not enough people. There are
sure,
people, but not enough people.
sure, and there aren't actually that many.
There are very few. In
Oh,
our country now,
yeah.
increasingly fewer and fewer.
And there aren't so many who take the risks that you have taken, the challenges that you've taken, and you just go for it. And we love that about you. But from a journalist to an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
are you wearing the two different hats, and how is it different? Different skill sets?
Different skill sets. So if you had asked me a few years ago, would you ever be an entrepreneur? I would have said no, because it's not a skill set that I think, or I would have thought that I had. I would have been happiest in my little Ertiga out there in some remote corner of the country or world telling a story. But I think that the media landscape changed so much that there was no option but to branch off alone. Uh, if I wanted to be independent, if I did not want to be captured, if I did not want to tailor make myself into someone else's idea of me, I had to. I had to walk that distance. Would I like somebody to take the business end from me and do it? Very much. Have I found that person yet? No. Am I looking for that person? Yes. So please, yeah, if you're that person or you know that person, I'm very happy to have that conversation, because my heart still belongs to the journalistic process. And while it feels good, though, to not be an employee, I don't want to be an employee for the rest of my life. I do recognize that it would be really great to have a partner who has these skill sets more than I do, because my
Sure.
skill sets are my work, and I'd love to be a co-owner in a journalism cooperative. I wish we lived in a country where journalists could come together and own platforms instead of corporates or
Sure.
governments or politicians. But we're just not seeing that happen in India. But you are seeing a number of very talented individual women branch off on their own, leaving mainstream media, showing the courage that their male colleagues have not shown, and running little what islands of excellence, or trying to run little islands of excellence. And to everybody watching this, I hear so much carping about the media, but we get the media we deserve. And if you like what you see on these small independent platforms, whether it's mine, whether it's Faye D'Souza, whether it's Anubha Bhosle, and I'm making it a point to name the women, because I do think that they have a tougher time in the market than the men do. Come and support us. Subscribe to our channels. Contribute to us. We're all going to go into subscription models. That's going to be the future. So pay for the news that you like. That is going to be the only way to keep your news free.
So your platform is mojo.in, right?
My platform, I deliberately started with social media instead of the web portal. The web portal is still being built. There
Okay.
was a reason for that. My reason for that was that a study of people's content consumption habits shows you clearly that people don't go to a website every day. They basically click on links that interest them, and they search a lot for content on YouTube. So we started with a YouTube channel, and then we worked our way backwards to being on Facebook, to being on Instagram, to being on Twitter. And now that we have the brand and we have the recall, and our work was recognized, whether in the Delhi riots or through the pandemic, now we are building our website, right? But we're a video first channel. So for us, the website is almost irrelevant. So my YouTube channel is called Mojo Story, and it's available on all of these 4 platforms. The website will come, but more almost as the thing we're doing at the end. As I've done the journey the other way around, because I believe that how people consume content is changing.
Yes, it is, for sure. Barkha, I have one final question for you. I know you've given me so much of your time. I expected it to be a 45-minute session, but thank you. Can I take a few audience questions? Is it all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Quickly,
And then
let's do it quickly.
yeah, very quickly.
Okay.
I just see just the relevant ones. I'll take lots of engagement for you. Barkha, but never stops. I'll just see Barkha, don't for you out of box. Why don't you this time bring out narrative of former? Tune in. I'm just not taking anything to do with politics here because people have mostly commented and said how wonderful it is. They've given you lots of compliments. How do you deal with people's opinions, especially the trolls? Sushma Gaikwad asked me.
I did answer that. Yeah.
What is the difference between a woman and a man other than a sexual aspect? I guess.
But I'm actually happy with that question.
Yeah. Okay.
I just feel like there's a generational argument happening on this question, and a lot of younger women want to assert their gender, and they believe that certain changes, there's certain things that as women they feel or experience. I, however, belong to the school of thought and certainly to the generation that has fought all my life against the gendering of the workplace, right? I recognize the gender discrimination, but I don't want to be ghettoized by my gender. And I think these are 2 different things. So in the nature versus nurture debate, I certainly belong to nurture. I certainly think most of our differences are social constructs, sexuality.
Go frozen. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that's it. Sorry, Barkha. I think we froze for a bit. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that for me, it's all a continuum. Sexuality is fluid, gender is a continuum, and I don't want to be ghetto. I do believe that most roles are provided by society and not organic or I don't want biological determinism.
Sure. I constantly talk about this thing about othering. We always talk about others, right?
Yeah.
We always say others,
Yeah.
but we are the others ourselves, right? We are the society, and we have to collectively make that change. And Barkha, there are lots of comments here as well. I'll send you the link for you to look at. But most
Sure,
people,
I'll share it on my platforms as well.
thank you. And there was a poem I read on your Insta, Rain, and I'm not going to share the poem, but what a beautiful poem! But in that, there was something that stuck with me, and I want to ask you that question before we leave. If you were to live this life again, would you do anything differently?
Not one thing. Not one thing, and that doesn't mean I haven't made terrible mistakes. But the point is that's the point of the poem, that you make the same terrible mistakes again. Because what else is life? It's not some sanitized, perfect sort of version of yourself, right? It's us with all those lows, and without those lows, what do the highs mean?
Wonderful. I love that poem, and I love that you share these things which give us an idea of who you are as a person. But today, I think we got to see an aspect of you from the other side.
That's your great skill. So thank you for having me and for this conversation.
Thank you, Barkha. Thank you, audience, for joining in. Thank you, Barkha, to your team, Ashish and Nidhi, who really have worked, in the background to make this happen. And Nicola, thank you very much for
thank you, Nicola.
for managing this very smoothly. And our next 2 guests this month will be Baman Irani and Gulpanag, and I will share the dates soon. Again, very interesting speakers. We will get to hear the other side from them as well. And you know where to find me, at Speaking Minds Global or at Totally Out Now. Barkha, so much love to you. Thank you for
lots of love. Thank you. Lots of love to you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.